morning, good afternoon, good evening. Many of you, if you have been familiar on Zimbabwe social media, you'll be familiar with this gentleman here, Acie Lumumba. In this video, he's claiming that the IMF has predicted a 6% economic growth rate for Zimbabwe in the coming 12 months. And according to him, this is proof that Zimbabwe is back. I think this is just idiotic propaganda. Zimbabwe is a pariah state. And there is no coming back as long as the country remains a pariah state. Let's just listen to what he had to say, and then I will comment on it.
Zimbabwe is back. I am going to make you understand how this affects you and what you must do to be part of the story of Zimbabwe's comeback economy. The International Monetary Fund just looked Zimbabwe into the eye and they said, you are going to grow 6% in the next 365 days and you will become the fastest growing economy in Africa. Not maybe, not if conditions are met. You are going to grow 6% guaranteed. What makes this a moment in time is they said it out loud in public to the world with their official letterhead and stamp, which means somewhere in this world, billionaires just Googled Zimbabwe. My name is Lumumba, your explainer-in-chief. Let me take you back to 2017. Mnangagwa steps into office and he takes over an economy that was not just sick. We had become the patient that every doctor would write off, a hopeless prognosis of futile care. The world had filed us under the category of do not resuscitate. If you can imagine a patient who's lying in a hospital bed in the ICU as Zimbabwe. Now, I want you to imagine the face of the president as he walks in. He didn't just see Zimbabwe. What he felt is what you and me perhaps would feel if that patient was your only child. It was an impossible attempt. The president said, roll up your sleeves. He kicked everybody out. He said, get me the best minds and bring them into the room. He took the greatest banker we've ever produced in Zimbabwe, in George Guva Matanga. He took a professor who's the highest order in the merit of economics out of Switzerland, Tuli Ngube, and he said, we're not going to accept this as our ending. It's time to make our choices. And those choices were choices that would make enemies. Mnangagwa chose discipline. He chose transparency with lenders when secrecy would have been a much easier option. And those choices were not popular. They were very necessary. Now, the IMF doesn't do sentiment. They don't do hopeful narratives. They look at the numbers, they look at the behavior, and they look at whether you're going to default on your debt or you're actually going to pay it back.
Well, I can stop it there. We don't have to listen to all of it. But this is just nonsense. Let's start where he started. Mnangagwa took over from Mugabe in 2017 on the cocktails of the military coup. When he came into office, he announced that Zimbabwe was back. He announced Zimbabwe is open for business. The very sentiments that our friend here is trying to tell us. The reality on the ground told a different story. When he said Zimbabwe is open for business, he was so sure that there will be a floodgate of investors investing in Zimbabwe. what actually happened is none of those investors came in. Because investors are a shrewd lot. They knew what had happened in 2017 was nothing more than musical chairs. The coup had booted out Mugabe and a few of his cronies around him and replaced him with Mnangagwa and his cronies. To say Zimbabwe is open for business was totally meaningless. Zimbabwe was still a pariah state. Zimbabwe's economy was in comatose because Zimbabwe was a pariah state during Mugabe's time. And then you've got a musical chair and you think, you can just announce to the world, Zimbabwe is now open for business and people will believe you. An investor will flood in. Nonsense. This is what we are seeing again being repeated here. Yes, the IMF has said Zimbabwe's economy will grow by 6% in the next 12 months. But that doesn't prove anything. For your own information, Zimbabwe's economy grew by a staggering 12% in the first year of the GNU of 2008 to 2013. 12%, twice as much as the 6% which is being predicted now. But nobody went to town about Zimbabwe is back because they knew that 12% was a result of economic policies. One of them was to scrap the Zimbabwe dollar, which by the time of the beginning of the GNU, it lost its value. Inflation was a nauseating 500 billion%. There was no meaningful economic activity in the country. The shops were empty. You could not do any service because how can you price it? If you're going to pay in the Zimbabwe dollar, which is losing value at 500 billion%. So at the beginning of the GNU, the Zimbabwe dollar was scrapped. That alone allowed meaningful economic activity to take place. And that revived the economy and allowed it to grow by the staggering 12%. But no one talked of Zimbabwe is back because they also knew that as much as scrapping the Zimbabwe dollar helped to restore some confidence in the economy, long-term growth could not be guaranteed as long as the country remained a pariah state. This is why it was important during the GNU to implement the democratic reforms which would have ended the case of one-party state, the pariah state, the bad governance, the case of bad governance. As we know, no meaningful reforms were implemented during the 5 years. And so at the end of it, ZANU-PF was able to go back into office, and it was business as usual. The same applies to 2017. Mnangagwa came into power, the cocktails of the coup. He promised to stamp out corruption. He promised to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Investors were not fooled by that promise. They knew Mnangagwa is not a Democrat. Mnangagwa is as corrupt as they come. So for him to be promising all those things was not good enough. He had to deliver them. He has failed to stamp out corruption. If anything at all, corruption now is worse than it was during Mugabe's time. And as for free, fair, and credible elections, we know Mnangagwa blatantly rigged the 2018 elections and went on to rig the 2023 elections. Zimbabwe is still a pariah state. And as long as the country remains a pariah state, the country is going nowhere. And our friend here, he can witter and talk all he wants. That will not change the reality. If we want meaningful change in Zimbabwe, we have to deal with our curse of rigged elections and bad governance, which is the root cause why we are a pariah state. IMF's promise of 6% economic growth is meaningless. To pretend that because IMF has given Zimbabwe an economic growth of 6% is proof that the country is back. It's just cheap propaganda. And the people of Zimbabwe are sick and tired of cheap propaganda. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.